In a stupor, sitting on the side of the road. Ain't got an honest feeling.
Finding a musical direction after Gossip wasn't very difficult because, you know, the last record, I didn't feel like everyone was really happy and together and, like, you know, really signed up for it. I don't think it was like we used to be before. Something was different. I don't know why, really, necessarily. And I don't think it was anyone's fault. I just think that we were growing up and things were changing, and I don't know what it was. But, you know, Nathan had moved back to Arkansas. And so because of that, you know, after the last Gossip album, I was like, well, you know, the people at the label were like, oh, well, why don't you start writing the record? And I was like, well, okay, well, that seems like I'm going to have to start doing that. And it just dawned on me, like, after meeting with all these people and, like, meeting all these different songwriters and writing songs, but I would just be like, but these aren't Gossip songs. These aren't Gossip songs. And I kept getting frustrated, and I was like, of course they're not Gossip songs. They're not with Nathan, and they're not with Hannah. So, like, if there's no, it isn't Gossip, so it's not Gossip. And I think I just got to this point where I was like, you know what, like, obviously Nathan is finished. Nathan was doing other plays. He just had other things to do. So I just sent him a text message that was literally like, you know, I've been writing songs. I think I'm ready to just call it a day, to stop Gossip. And he was like, okay. Like, it was seriously just like that. It was not even a thing. No, not at all to me. It's funny. I think when I first heard the record back and was listening to things, I was like, this just sounds like Gossip songs. But then I was like, oh, that's okay. Because, you know what's funny is it made me realize, I mean, how long was I in that band? And, like, I think that people, saw me as being in the Gossip more than I did. I think I gave, and even, like, as a feminist and, like, someone who idolizes feminists in music, and what's so funny is, like, how much power I gave to the other members of Gossip and thought actually it was all about them. I thought that I was just the one who talked about it. Like I would go into interviews and be the talker, but they were the ones who were the talent. And I think now, doing this record, I was like, oh, I was an equal part of that band. Like, I contributed way more than I thought I did. It's really funny. Like, I learned a lot about myself because I really did think it was all them. And that if I didn't, for years I was like, if I didn't have Nathan, I thought I would fall on my face. And how codependent that is, and how heteronormative that is. Like, I think, like, the sexism of it was so ingrained in my brain. I think it's really interesting, like, the way that the patriarchal, like, I guess the patriarchy was, like, creeping into my head. And even though I was in this band that was, like, always talking about feminism and, like, talking about what it was like to be empowered and to my experience as a woman in a band, I never realized, and it had nothing to do with Nathan. It all had to do with me, and I never realized how ingrained that was in my brain until we made this. When you start out really young, 18 or whatever, for me, I think people talk about that they lose something when they get older, and I feel like I gained things because I was so afraid of actually writing words to songs. I wouldn't do it. And people thought it was punk and they thought it was brash, but actually I was so afraid and self-conscious about writing real words to songs, even though I knew I could do it, that I just would not. I wouldn't listen to, like, if we were making a record, I would never do another take because it hurt so bad to do it. Like, it was painful almost. because I was too vulnerable. I didn't like feeling exposed, so I had to put on a facade, not of being confident. It has nothing to do with my body. It has nothing to do with the way I look. It was all about people seeing what was really going on inside of my head. And now I don't care. I mean, I still do. I'm still self-conscious to be like, is that a stupid lyric or whatever? But I'm not as like, oh, I don't want people to know what's going on. I just don't care anymore. That's the best thing about getting older. Like, it's sad that we appreciate the things people do when they're younger more, I think.
Bless my soul, I can't resist.
You know, I listen to a lot of Bobby Gentry. I listen to a lot of lots of country music. I listen to a lot of Patsy Cline. I think Loretta Lynn is one of the best songwriters of all time, like ever. Like her ability to still, she's just one of those really witty, like very country sophisticated people that like have a way with words and like turn a phrase that's so incredible that is, I think, pretty unappreciated by the world mostly, especially when you mention country music. I think people usually think of Dolly Parton or, you know, maybe Hank Williams, and all of that stuff is really great. Dolly's amazing. I'm not saying she's not, but I just wish that they mentioned Loretta Lynn more as a songwriter, not just a singer, because she's so good. Yeah, I listen to so much Paul Simon. It's ridiculous, like constantly. You know, there's like, Kristen and I were having a really hard time, and I went down to Arkansas for a while, and I was listening to Graceland on repeat. And, you know, I grew up really close to Graceland. So you'll be like, shit, we'll just go to Memphis. And so I was like, all I want to do is, I told my sister, I was like, I want you to take me to Graceland. And I just want to listen to Paul Simon all the way there. And so we did. But when we got there, Graceland was closed. That is not a joke.
Bless my soul, I can't resist.
I love it when politics become fashionable. I think it's fucking awesome. It's like, what did we do this for if we don't want people to start identifying as that? Like, what I thought this was about a movement. You know, like people get too cool and they're like, oh, they're just using it to sell stuff. And I'm like, better that than fucking weird shit. It's like, use feminism. Don't use racism. That's great. By all means. Say it every fucking day. Say it 20 times a day. I don't give a shit. Nobody owns it. I think if we can't like have that moment where it's just like, can we just appreciate that people are calling themselves a feminist instead of judging them and being like, but are they really? It's like, do you really give a shit? It's like, why do you care? Like I understand what it's like. I know what it's like to be protective of a movement that you are very devoted to. I get it. I understand what it's like to feel like someone's being disingenuous. But it's also like, I know that you have to trust people sometimes. You just have to just let go and let people be a fucking feminist. It's okay. I think it's great. It's awesome.
Bless my soul, that's the way it is. Bless my soul, I can't resist.
It is true, Geraldine, that I will be in a Gus Van Sant movie. I don't know if I can tell you about the story, but I can tell you that the character's not very far cry from how I naturally am. And I just pretended that I was my aunt and my mom and there's a couple aunts, and I just pretended I was my mom in her dramatic way when she's very serious and she's explaining something. I mean, you know, but I'm not an actor, so I just kind of played myself in this weird way. I loved acting with him, but I don't think it's like, I can't explain it. It's not because it was a bad experience, but I just feel like there are people who are probably better at it, so they should do it. I'm like, you know what? You be the actor.
My soul, I can't resist.